Fears about runaway climate change, the cost of living crisis, and the future of democratic institutions were top of mind for several dozen activists who gathered for a town hall-style meeting at the Aberdeen Cultural Centre in Moncton on Monday. The event, organized by Sierra Club Canada, was billed as a response to billionaires and corporate actors who value profit over collective community well-being. Michel Nogue, the retired Radio-Canada journalist, moderated a panel discussion that featured conservationist Moe Qureshi, anti-poverty activist Robert MacKay, and retired legal scholar Michèle Caron. That panel was followed by small group discussions and a barnstorm, an activity which involves recruiting people as organizers into grassroots social movements and campaigns. At the Moncton event, one participant said that small volunteer-based groups need help promoting their causes as they compete with high-paid corporate lobbyists who sometimes meet with government officials several times a month.
Well, I'm involved also with the Citizens for Peace. It's a local group here that advocates peace worldwide. And we found it very difficult to access the media and present our case. But we're also involved in environmental issues. One thing that we find is that we call, when we meet here, it's the usual suspect. Yeah. So you might have a group in a community, 40, 50, 60 people, and how do you engage other people? That's something we need to learn. And I think at the end here of the session, there was a new technique which we call barnstorming. So at least that's something you can take back to your group.
Sinead Callender, who works for Sierra Club Canada, said the goal of the event was to bring together people who are upset about multiple overlapping crises, such as climate change and poverty.
Personally, for me, it's great to know that you're not alone in feeling this way about certain things, especially like the housing crisis, climate change, and especially as a young person, like a youth, it's good to network with not only your peers, but the generation before you, just to share that knowledge, but also to learn and to better understand how you can call to action a little bit more. So I find like coming to these events, you just, even if you're not sure what they are about, you learn on the fly, you go with the flow, but also if you know and you actually have a voice to speak, this is a great space to voice your concerns as well.
But for all the goodwill at Monday's event, it was mostly familiar faces. That's a real concern for activists as they aim to attract people and to build social movements capable of confronting these world historical challenges. Stay tuned for uncut footage from Monday evening's panel. For the NB Media Co-op, I'm David Gordon-Koch.
So good evening. My name is Chantal Landry. I will be your MC for the evening. I am also a long-term member of the Common Front for Social Justice, who is one of the co-sponsors of this evening. But there are many other co-sponsors this evening. I don't know if you've read the list of co-sponsors. There's a list. So I do want to thank the Foundation of Sierra Club Canada, La Fédération du Travail du Nouveau-Brunswick. I'm reading it in English here. Hold on, French. Okay. New Brunswick Anti-Shale Gas Alliance, ACORN, Council of Canadians, the Kent County chapter, Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, New Brunswick, Canadian Labour Congress, New Brunswick Environmental Network, and the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. So those are all amazing groups. So we're here this evening, probably because we have concerns and passions, and that we want to work towards the greater good for all, and that we can do more if we work together and not in our silos. And I'm hoping that this evening inspires some of you to do different things and work in collaboration. And I hope that it also encourages you to potentially research organizations that you've never heard of before. But this evening, the way that it'll go is we will start with a panel behind me. And then we're going to do little small groups. We're going to answer some questions. And then following that, we're going to do a barnstorm. Barnstorm is what it's called. I've never done a barnstorm. I've done a brainstorm. We're not in a barn, but apparently that's what it's called. So Angela will be emceeing that towards the end. So that's how the evening will go, and then we will finish at 9 o'clock this evening. So just so you have an idea of how this evening will go forward. That being said, my next step is to introduce you to Michel Nogue. Michel Nogue is originally from Saskatchewan, and he started his career with Radio-Canada in Saskatchewan, and then came to New Brunswick on Acadie. And I would say if 39 years, 39 years here in Radio-Canada, so I think he's an adopted Acadian at this point. I think we can call that. I don't know if his accent's changed at all, but I'm from Ontario, so I know my accent has changed. So he will be your panelist for this evening, and I will allow him to introduce you to the rest of the panel.
Merci Chantal. Bienvenue à Moncton, à ceux qui sont de l'extérieur. Welcome to Moncton. Avant de commencer, je vous demanderai d'éteindre vos cellulaires. Pour une raison bien simple. D'abord, pour qu'on puisse avoir une discussion sans être dérangé par les téléphones. Puis aussi, comme geste symbolique, de, pendant 2 heures, fermer nos cellulaires pour que les géants des nouvelles technologies n'aient pas accès à notre attention, parce que finalement, c'est notre attention qui est le bien le plus précieux, puis qui rapporte des milliards de dollars à ces grandes compagnies-là. So I would ask you to please shut off your cell phones. First of all, so we can have a discussion without being bothered by the rings, unless you have, someone has to reach you in an urgent way. And also as a symbol of the fact that for 2 hours we're going to shut out the oligarchs who are making billions of dollars off our attention. Alors, si ça va, on va commencer avec la discussion avec la table ronde. I'll start with Robert MacKay, who's the co-chair community for the New Brunswick Common Front for Social Justice. For close to 30 years, he's been an activist on many causes of marginalized people. He has a singular passion, which is to have heard the voices of so-called problem people. And he's been honest over the years in the media about the obstacles that he has to overcome to be where he is today. And he has a unique perspective on the question of poverty, disadvantaged people, and it's appropriate in the sense that we're having this discussion in Moncton because our everyday lives every day we see people who are marginalized. We have over 500 homeless people in Moncton. It's increased, 60%? Poverty in New Brunswick is still strong, 10%, I think. 85,000 people in New Brunswick live in poverty, over 10%. Mr. MacKay, when you see figures like that, what do you think? What goes through your mind when you see how, after all these years, there's so much poverty?
It's certainly difficult to see that. It's bad to see that, I should say. But at the same time, we kind of know the forces that are arrayed against us. You talked about the oligarchs. We know the whole world is set up on the profit motive, and the rich are getting richer, and the middle class is getting shrunk, and the whole deal. So I live right downtown. I see homeless people all the time. It's terrible. It's a big challenge to fight to get people out of that way, not only because of the economic means, but also drugs and other issues that cloud over, make it more difficult. So it's awful to see.
We'll come back to you later when we talk about more solutions. Our next guest is Moe Qureshi. He's the Director of Climate Research and Policy for the New Brunswick Conservation Council. He's a renewable energy expert. He's worked for environmental nonprofits and NGOs for over a decade. He's sat on the Sustainable Development Advisory Council for Environment Canada, and he's a board member for Ontario Nature. Mr. Mr. Qureshi, the New Brunswick is not doing too well either with regards to greenhouse gases. We're above the national average, and Canada's not doing too well either, 15th out of 17 countries as far as greenhouse gases. What do you think of that?
Not a big fan of that, to be honest. When it comes to greenhouse gases, a lot of you were mentioning oligarchs or proponents who are against climate change. The frequent argument they used is that, Canada generates less emissions than China or India or some of these other countries, for example. But when you think of it per GDP per person, we are consuming quite a lot. We've grown up in a culture of consumerism, which is it's just exacerbated over the last few years. And after COVID, we've really seen, what pollution can do to people, that health concerns, economic concerns, all crumbling down together at the same time. And when it comes to climate or economic or health solutions, we're realizing that our government, since they're so profit-focused, they're not really putting people first. Our policies related to climate or policies on how we do our day-to-day business is very much profit-driven, which tends to take advantage of the earth and of people. And I'm trying to find a way of how we can restructure this kind of way of thinking to put the values that we as a community share and put those values first as a priority. So, for example, when we're talking about the homeless or energy bills are starting to go up, some people, crazy people, think that water shouldn't be a human right, which very much disagree with that. But I'm starting to believe that electricity is starting to be a human right. It's part of everything that's in our culture, our phones, our water kettle, our fridge, everything. And if people are struggling to pay their bills and we're not sourcing this energy responsibly, we're just creating a bigger problem later. And I feel, as someone who is a bit younger in this movement, I have been learning about climate change since I was a kid. And now to come to this day and age, and I started working at the Conservation Council 2 years ago, and a few weeks ago I was asked to clean out some of the old archival information and look through that. And it's the same problems, the same fight that I'm looking at today and seeing that my predecessors are doing that same thing. So it's a bit disheartening that it's still the same fight, but I'm a stubborn optimist, Michel. I will keep fighting the good fight and try to make a difference.
Ma prochaine invitée, c'est Michèle Caron. Michèle Caron est une féministe, une membre de la communauté LGBTQ2. Elle est une enseignante. Elle a d'abord été enseignante aux enfants avec un handicap mental. Elle a été gestionnaire aux ressources humaines de la fonction publique, représentante régionale à l'Alliance de la fonction publique du Canada. On l'a beaucoup connue comme professeure de droit à l'Université de Moncton, présidente du syndicat des professeurs et bibliothécaires de l'Université de Moncton. Puis, depuis sa retraite, il y a 15 ans, avez-vous pris votre retraite à 40 ans?
Ben oui.
Elle est membre du bureau de direction de travail sécuritaire Nouveau-Brunswick et la présidente de la Fondation Marichette, qui recueille des fonds pour aider des jeunes femmes à poursuivre les études postsecondaires. Madame Caron, ce n'est pas beaucoup plus encourageant pour les médias. On parle de démocratie, tous les problèmes dont on a parlé jusqu'à maintenant, pauvreté, changement climatique, ça revient au déficit démocratique. Est-ce qu'on peut parler de déficit démocratique au Canada quand vous voyez ce qui se passe avec les médias d'information, ce qui se passe dans le sud des États-Unis? Des fois, on est pas mal découragé. Vous?
Ah, ben, c'est dur de ne pas se décourager, là. C'est dur de ne pas se décourager, mais on n'a pas vraiment le choix, hein. Il va falloir qu'on continue. Mais je pense que c'est Amnesty International a sorti son rapport annuel il y a environ 2 semaines. Là. Puis, la première phrase du rapport, c'est que nous sommes dans un état de crise. Et c'est effectivement, même le pape, le nouveau pape, parle on est dans une situation de crise. Et le nouveau pape parle d'une nouvelle révolution industrielle. Le même genre de révolution qui a amené des changements structuraux importants, je dirais à la fin du 19e siècle. Et là, on serait dans le même genre de situation où est-ce que c'est que la production, les systèmes de production changent, les lieux de production changent, mais aussi les gouvernements changent. Et à l'heure actuelle, moi, je pense que ça a commencé déjà, là, ça fait à peu près une vingtaine d'années, mais on est vraiment à un point tournant. Un point tournant de la démocratie. Va-t-elle survivre? Elle va probablement survivre dans des endroits, mais elle va mourir aussi pour quelques années là, à d'autres endroits. Et quand on parle de démocratie, ce n'est pas juste un mot qu'il y en a sur le mur. La démocratie, ça a un impact sur le monde. Parce que la démocratie, son principe fondamental, c'est l'amour de l'égalité. C'est aimer l'égalité de sorte que tout le monde, chaque être humain, a le droit de participer à la société. Alors que qu'est-ce qui est en train de s'organiser? C'est des gouvernements, des oligarques, et dans certains cas, ça va être le totalitarisme, comme on a vu avec Hitler. Donc, je pense qu'on est à un point où est-ce que c'est qu'il faut qu'on arrête de se voir comme étant des consommateurs et qu'on commence à se voir comme étant des citoyens. Puis, en tout cas, je veux dire, on pourrait en parler longuement, là, mais moi, je pense qu'on n'a pas parlé assez de démocratie, puis on a dit que c'était les élites. Ça, c'est des discours d'élite. Les woke, là, la gang de woke, les élites qui parlent des gros mots comme oligarque, démocratie, c'est tous des gros mots. Alors que je pense que ce qui est important, parce que si on les connaît pas, si on ne connaît pas les systèmes, on ne les voit pas venir.
C'est intéressant quand vous parlez qu'on est vu comme des consommateurs en démocratie. Si vous rejoignez ce que M. Qureshi dit, qu'on est des consommateurs seulement vus comme des consommateurs, mais qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire? Vous voyez, on regarde les médias d'information, on va sur l'Internet, puis on peut se décourager pas mal vite. Les gens dans la salle, les citoyens, est-ce qu'on est complètement démunis ou est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose qu'on peut faire? Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose de concret qu'on peut faire?
Moi, je pense que faut qu'on continue les luttes qu'on mène. Je veux dire, parce qu'il y a des gens qui n'ont rien à manger. Il y en a d'autres qui n'ont pas d'abri. Il y en a qui subissent de la discrimination, qui sont attaqués dans leur dignité. Il y en a d'autres qu'on envoie dans les prisons au Salvador. On est en train de faire mourir en Palestine, je dirais, des enfants meurent devant nous autres pendant qu'on est en train de manger du popcorn. Il y a des luttes qui s'imposent, mais je pense que dans nos luttes, par exemple nos luttes économiques, il faut qu'on amène la dimension de l'organisation politique et il faut qu'on mène nos luttes de manière démocratique. C'est pas en criant on veut du changement puis on veut être contre les taxes, parce qu'il y a du monde qui s'organise effectivement pour être contre les taxes. Donc, il y a des idées fausses qu'il faut combattre.
Mais concrètement, Mme Caron, oui, là, il y a des gens, les gens qui veulent payer moins de taxes sont bien représentés, mais concrètement, est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose que le citoyen peut faire? Est-ce que collectivement, on peut faire quelque chose? Est-ce que ça passe par l'éducation, peut-être? L'implication en politique?
Je pense que c'est tout ça. C'est tout ça. Il faut continuer la lutte. Il faut aller chercher d'autres personnes qui mènent la lutte. Parce qu'il y en a plein là, qui mènent la lutte. Quand on regarde le convoi, là, le convoi qu'il y avait eu à Ottawa.
Des camionneurs.
C'était le convoi des camionneurs. Ils sont actifs. Mais pour propager quelles idées? Et c'est ça qu'il faut s'attaquer à ces idées-là, parce que les oligarques, ils sont, comme il y a quelqu'un qui m'a dit, il a dit, Trump il a été élu par une majorité. De quoi vous lamentez? C'est de la démocratie. Ben, un des problèmes, c'est que la démocratie, sans égalité, c'est pas de la démocratie. C'est un principe fondamental, c'est que tout le monde puisse avoir sa part et participer. Ça fait partie de la démocratie.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. MacKay, is there something that can be done with regards to poverty? Because we're collective, as a collectivity or as a community, the reaction to poverty isn't always positive. How do we change the attitudes towards poverty? What can individuals do so that at the end of the day, people have enough to live on and, have the basic needs are met, have a house over your head? And is there anything that individually we can do?
In your reading of my biography, I mentioned that I like to have the voices of poor people, the voices of marginalized people heard. I've had the experience of going to the United States and in Ontario and other places in Canada, but in particularly in the United States. And I saw how in the mental health system, as an example, we had people who were mental patients, the poorest of the poor in every way you can imagine. And it was learned over the course of many years about peer support, how people can help, the skills that they have to be able to help each other. And they learned, and since only about 25 or 30 years, the state of Georgia took these not nice-looking poor people, and they often use the phrase that the stars aligned and everything came together. And they went and, long story short, they realized the value of these people, had it entrenched in their bureaucracy and credentialed. And the organizations that received Medicaid funding had to hire a couple of these people in every agency in Georgia to work on the interdisciplinary teams in their healthcare systems, or they would lose their funding. So I guess one example is to go and show the economic value of poor people, find opportunities where they can do things that only they can do. In the real world, maybe that's hard to translate, but I'm giving you a concrete example of what I've seen by being in Georgia, being in Michigan. Poor people are written off, low-skilled people are written off, and the reality of the situation is that in certain niches, they have areas based on the lived experience that they have, that they can do things that nobody else can do, and they can contribute economically to make teams work better and to drive down costs. And they should be recognized for these things. But it is a hell of a fight. We have this all over the United States, this kind of certified peer support workforce in the U.S. No Canadian province has yet taken that up.
So
Why?
It's to think outside the box and to see these people as contributing citizens instead of a drain on the system.
To see the reality of that. But to see that, you have to look close. And looking close at dirty, poverty-stricken environments is not an easy thing to do.
Ce que Robert dit aussi, je trouve que ça fait ressortir la qualité de l'empathie. C'est que l'empathie, de considérer que chaque être humain vaut la peine. Et que c'est par empathie qu'ils ont traité, pas en fait un patient, puis tu le mets dans une boîte, mais l'empathie est un facteur qui tu sais, qui peut jouer à petite échelle, mais aussi à la grande échelle.
Puis l'empathie, c'est peut-être une denrée plus rare. Quoique, je me trompe peut-être qu'il y a encore beaucoup d'empathie dans nos communautés, qu'on la voit tout simplement pas. C'est peut-être ça, plutôt. Il y a encore beaucoup d'empathie. Mr. Qureshi, what can we do? We see that the climate is going to pot, more floods, more forest fires. What can we do individually besides drive?
Before I answer what we can do, we're at a point where, for example, in Halifax, with the recent fires that hit some of those communities, that as they're rebuilding, some of these families are now unable to get insurance for their homes. So insurance companies are now starting to reject claims due to environmental causes. And some insurance companies are starting to almost go broke with climate change payouts. And this is a kind of a unique opportunity where now a major industry is starting to be affected by climate change. So I haven't found a solution yet, but maybe there's a way to get insurance providers to help push government to take some action. But in terms of what people can do, for several years, when we think about social media, Facebook, Instagram, influencers, we have been pushed this narrative of personal responsibility for quite some time. And personal responsibility is very important. Someone might have used less straws or driving an EV or eating less meat. And these are all good things to do that will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. But we have missed the dialogue on corporate responsibility. We have completely missed it where me reducing my plastic consumption is a drop in the bucket to BP spilling millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. And how do we turn this back on its head? And to me, the carbon tax is an interesting example. I know that's a spooky topic, sorry to scare everyone on this, but the carbon tax was, when early days of environmentalism, when they brought up this idea, the idea was to tax corporations directly on the pollution they produced. But we all know how effective those lobbyists can be. Where if I meet with the government 3 to 4 times a year, I assure you, I'm checking the lobby registries. Some of these companies are there more than 30 times a month, okay? And they're pushing that personal responsibility narrative. And they changed it to, why should we pay the carbon tax when all of us could pay that carbon tax instead? So the idea, now everyone gets the carbon tax, some people get paid back, but now recent politics, we remove that carbon tax and it's reopened that discussion of responsibility. Where does the responsibility lie, right? Is it on us or is it on the company? And think of it when you go to a grocery store, if you're buying detergent, there are so many brands of detergent. And typically, if you are in a poverty situation, if you are a student, or if you are a busy adult with kids at home and a full-time job, you don't know what to choose. You tend to choose the cheapest option. And we've designed our system where the cheapest option is the most unsustainable option, where you're taking advantage of people, you're taking advantage of resources, whether it's underpaying people or anything, where we need to create a system where the company is responsible for the life cycle of their product. We need to change our model where the cheapest product is the more sustainable product. So I think it comes down to, we need to, of course, we all are all personally responsible, but that's not the heart of the issue that we're all discussing here today. The heart of the issue is the few that are taking more than their fair share. So I think it's on people to talk to their MLAs or how they vote is critical.
Je me demande si on est rendu à un point tournant dans les différents dossiers qui nous intéressent. Are we at a tipping point? You often, some of you have talked about this a bit. We're at a tipping point. Are we at a point where it has to change? Est-ce qu'on est rendu à un point qu'on peut plus continuer, qu'il faut que ça change?
Ben, c'est exactement ça, je veux dire, c'est la question de reprendre, parce qu'on parle des oligarques. Okay? Mais les oligarques, par définition, okay, c'est dans l'intérêt des oligarques, c'est ça le gouvernement des oligarques, c'est dans leur intérêt uniquement, et eux autres, ils ont intérêt à ce que... Ils ne sont pas intérêts à l'égalité. Ils n'ont pas intérêt, ils n'aiment pas les lois. Hein? La règle de droit, OK? La règle de droit, là, pour eux autres, il n'y a pas ça, parce que la règle de droit doit être observée par tout le monde, de manière égale. Mais les autres, ils ne veulent pas l'égalité, puis ils ne veulent pas respecter la loi. Puis c'est ça qui est en train de se produire. Ils sont en train d'éliminer toutes les protections environnementales, toutes les lois environnementales qui avaient été adoptées, toutes les barrières, toutes les garde-fous que la démocratie a réussi à mettre en place, ils sont en train de les détruire. Puis on ne parle pas seulement là, des États-Unis, là, okay? Puis même au Canada. On a juste besoin de regarder au Canada. On a Carney qui va répondre de manière très affirmative, tout ça, à Trump. Il va lui résister. Mais, et c'est en développant l'industrie canadienne. Mais quelle industrie canadienne qui veut développer? Le pipeline. Tout d'un coup, on a la première ministre du Nouveau-Brunswick qui nous parle du pipeline, elle aussi, puis que c'est une bonne idée. Bien, je veux dire, ce qui arrive, c'est qu'on n'est pas encore ici, au Canada, au Nouveau-Brunswick, on n'est pas encore à l'étape là, de Washington. Là. On n'a pas de Trump. Là. On a encore du pouvoir, puis c'est ça. Il faut reprendre ce pouvoir-là, mais pour reprendre ma première intervention, il faut détruire les fausses idées parce que les conservateurs ont quasiment passé. Là. Okay. Ça veut dire, c'est quoi? Là? C'est des idées de changement, il y a des idées démagogues qui ont circulé. Puis il faut les lutter, puis ça va être par l'éducation. En tout cas, il y a beaucoup de choses qu'il faut faire, mais il faut arrêter de dire « Ah, ben on ne peut rien faire ». Il faut parler. Pas seulement dans les médias sociaux, parce que là, on est dans nos boîtes à écho. Il faut sortir. Puis moi, je pense que ça va prendre... Les manifestations, là, c'est des vieilles idées, ça ne marche pas. Bien, ça marche parce que ça nous permet au moins de se rencontrer entre nous autres.
Mr. Qureshi.
I wanted to add to that. Definitely agree with that. And I like to believe we're in the tipping point, but what concerns me is we're in an area where we have... we're in an era where we have more information than ever. And that comes at a cost. And the cost is that we have more fake information than ever. We are, at least being in the climate space, there is an immense amount of misinformation or disinformation where people try to force two ideas together that don't really fit. And so I sometimes struggle when I have to do communications for the general public because I'm constantly told that, number one, I have to simplify my language. And it's wondering how much simpler can I get to explain these complicated issues that we're discussing. And if you oversimplify the problem, you oversimplify the solution, which tends to be an issue. And I don't like it when government oversimplifies things because that's what leads to these Band-Aids. But I think it's coming to a point where everyone is starting to struggle. And we're doing these case studies on energy poverty. So people who are struggling to pay their bills anymore. And we're reaching a point where the middle class is struggling with their energy bills, which we haven't really seen in the past. And recently we've had some people say that their energy bills is kind of feeling like a second mortgage on themselves. And I think if there might be a tipping point when enough people realize that, hey, I'm struggling, but everyone around me is also struggling. Who is doing well? And anyone who's doing well is nowhere in the community. There's someone else taking advantage of that.
Mr. MacKay, this is your area of people not doing well. Are we coming to a tipping point on poverty where it's just unbearable and something's got to happen?
Yeah, I think so, because you're squeezing every, from the bottom. You're squeezing in an unprecedented way. You're moving up the scale, and so the next level is squeezed, and the next level, and the middle class, and the upper middle class even, is facing it, and then that where government will never provide all the resources you need. We rely on volunteers and nonprofits and donating money. And when everybody is squeezed, there's the tipping point. I've got nothing more to give. Let these people rot on the street. I'm just trying to look after myself, right?
But it could happen to anyone. I heard that at one point it would take 3 bad lucks to end up on the street. But now, one strike, and you could be. You lose your job. You could be anyone could end up in poverty.
There's another facet of the tipping point. It's so easy for so many more people to just fall through the crack because of the burdens that we have in all of these areas of cost that people have to deal with.
Mais j'ajouterais à ça qu'il y a un danger, parce que je veux dire, avec l'appauvrissement qui s'accroît et tout ça, on va chercher des boucs émissaires. Les migrants. Les migrants, c'est la faute, les problèmes de logement qu'on a, c'est la faute des migrants. C'est pas la faute des gouvernements qui ont mal planifié, c'est pas la faute des gouvernements qui se sont sortis des programmes de logement abordables, c'est les migrants. Ça fait partie du populisme. Les oligarques, quand ils prennent le pouvoir, ils utilisent un discours populiste. Puis le discours populiste, il y a toujours un ennemi. C'est nous contre eux autres. Okay? C'est nous contre les woke, c'est nous contre les migrants. Les migrants sont la cause de tout. Nous, on ne sait pas exactement ce qui est nous, là, mais on n'est pas eux autres. Puis ça, je veux dire, c'est la division sociale. Les oligarques, ils la font. Puis le monde tombe dans le panneau. C'est ça l'affaire. C'est comment on s'assure que les immigrants ne deviennent pas le bouc émissaire ou que d'autres, les membres du LGBT, que la moralité publique est en train de disparaître, etc., à cause des trans. C'est ça le populisme, c'est ça les oligarques.
Il faut être vigilant et vigilante. Je pense que je cherche Chantal, je pense que c'est bon pour le temps. Ça va? 2 minutes. Des commentaires en terminant. Mr. Qureshi, anything before we wrap this up? Anything else you wanted to add?
I just want to say your voice does matter, and I'm hoping the youth start voting a bit more than they currently are. So that's my challenge that I'm trying to get my colleagues to take more of an interest. And if you're not already a member for the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, please become a member.
Mr. MacKay?
Sometimes it feels overwhelming, the challenges that we face, and you've got people that are interested in all kinds of issues that are hard to face. And unless we gather together the way that we are tonight, and unless we take up banners and march in the streets as required, and also be organized beyond speaking up, but be organized and fight that fight, we're going to be all discouraged, and there'll be no barriers at all for the oligarchs and the richest of the rich to do whatever they want. It'll be a free-for-all.
Madame Caron, est-ce qu'il y a une lueur d'espoir dans tout ceci, là? Le fait qu'on en parle encore, le fait que les gens veulent s'impliquer, qu'on voit que ça n'a pas de bon sens?
Moi, je crois que oui. Moi, je ne veux jamais perdre l'espoir. Mais j'écoutais Timothy Snyder aujourd'hui, puis il parle de unfreedom, puis la liberté, puis il disait qu'une des choses qui est grave avec les oligarques, c'est qu'ils n'ont pas de plan d'avenir. Il n'y a pas d'avenir. L'avenir n'existe pas. Ça fait que c'est à nous autres à la construire, l'avenir. C'est ça mon espoir, c'est qu'on va construire notre avenir. On ne va pas les laisser eux autres le construire, parce qu'ils n'ont pas intérêt à l'avenir, eux autres. Ils peuvent aller s'en aller d'une fusée sur Mars. C'est nous autres qui avons besoin de le construire, l'avenir.
Je pense que c'est une bonne façon de finir la table ronde. Je vous remercie beaucoup. Merci de votre contribution. C'est fort intéressant. Thank you very much. Interesting discussion. And thank you. Merci à vous d'avoir écouté la discussion. C'est bien apprécié. Bonne soirée, bonne discussion entre vous, bonne table ronde.